You might have noticed there's a lot of blame going around for allowing 7 million Americans to be evicted from their homes. Of course, you have the president that's blaming Congress. You've got Congress that was blaming the CDC. You got the CDC blaming the Supreme Court. And some have even resorted to blaming Nina Turner and Susan Sarandon for some odd reason. By the way, voting in that election is going on right now. Hello, somebody. So now the reason for all this blame is, well, obviously, it's a disaster to let 7 million people lose their homes as a result of this pandemic. And so it's an absolute disaster. And you're not going to be surprised, though, that, again, the way that this went down is you had Congress, you had everybody saying at the last moment, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. Oh, how could we let this happen? Well, as Andrew Perez explains in a piece for the Daily Poster, and I'm going to put the link in the description because it's an excellent piece. Last week, President Biden's administration belatedly called on Democrats in Congress to pass legislation to extend the CDC's eviction ban only days before it was set to expire on July 31st. A full month after the Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote that the moratorium would have to be extended by legislation. Now, the CDC, of course, could already do that. It would be they could put out do another extension, which would immediately get challenged and invalidated by the court. But until that, they might be able to tie up the courts long enough for people to at least get some of the money, get some of the reprieve. They didn't do that, of course. Now, Perez writes, the late request by Biden's press secretary Jen Psaki seemed to catch Democratic lawmakers off guard as they were getting ready to enjoy a long summer recess. House Democrats have quickly passed legislation extending the moratorium by unanimous consent, a maneuver that Republicans blocked. Afterwards, the House adjourned and lawmakers started streaming out of town. House Speaker Pelosi said last Friday that Democratic leaders had only learned 1 day earlier that the Biden administration was counting on lawmakers to renew the eviction ban via legislation. However, she had claimed the next day that her colleagues had led a relentless campaign to extend the moratorium, blaming Republicans for its failure. On Monday, Pelosi sent a letter to Democratic lawmakers arguing the moratorium must be extended by the administration. So now, breaking news, of course, on that, the President Biden has now put out a press release saying that, oh yeah, we're definitely looking into that, but provided little to no details on what they're actually going to do. So now on Pelosi, we didn't know is a pretty bad excuse. Oh, we didn't know. You didn't know. You didn't know. Oh, really, really? About something that's going to impact millions of people. You didn't know. Not buying it. Not buying it. I mean, look, I think that they knew. They obviously knew. But they didn't do anything about it until people started making a stink. Progressives, for example, Cori Bush. Cori Bush has been sitting outside in the Capitol, sleeping outside for like 4 days. That got a little bit of attention to it and embarrassed the hell out of Republicans. I'm sorry, that's a Freudian slip. Scared the hell out of the Democrats. But still, as a result of all of this bumbling, you still have millions of people that are losing their homes. And in case you're wondering, why didn't these people just pay their rent? I mean, we gave them millions of dollars. Well, you can't exactly spend money that hasn't gotten to you yet. Turns out there are billions of dollars still being held up by state legislators that should have gone to renters, but didn't. They haven't dispersed the funding. By the end of July, they actually only dispersed about $3 billion of the $25 billion. That's the first tranche of money. In fact, there's another $20 billion that actually hasn't gone to the states yet. And so, well, it's because they haven't spent the first amount of money. So all of this supposed help hasn't actually arrived at all. And in some cases, by the way, when help has arrived, there are some landlords that actually refused federal assistance, opting to instead wait for the eviction moratorium to end so they can kick people out. And of course, there are other places where, yeah, the eviction moratorium was technically on the books, and they didn't follow it anyway. I got one example. Antoinette Ellaby, 42 of Miami, she expects an eviction order within 2 to 3 weeks because her landlord refused to let the government cover her $5,000 in back rent. She now has to send her 5 children to live with her mother in another county. She said, quote, "My main concern is now that I have an eviction, how will I find another place to live? Some places will accept you and some will not." So said Ellaby, whose entire family got COVID-19 earlier this year. And the reason that I put that in that context is because some people who get COVID or who are, gotten COVID, that's why they lost their jobs. They had to quarantine. You lose your job when you have to quarantine. And then, of course, you can't get another job because everything's closed. And you ended up getting all this, amassing all of this debt, all of this back rent. That's disastrous. So people are in this situation, most of them for just, through no fault of their own. Perez continues. Soon after this, the Biden administration indicated in a statement that it would keep trying to tackle the issue, noting that it's directing federal agencies to re-examine whether there are any other authorities to take additional actions to stop evictions. In the meantime, the president will continue to do everything in his power to help renters from eviction, noted the statement. The release did not explain why the White House waited to act until after the moratorium expired. Well, now, with all that context, we get to why. Why? It turns out House Democrats' super PAC took in millions of dollars, including one from a chairman of a massive apartment rental company back in June. So now let me give you details on that. It turns out that residential real estate interests that could benefit the moratorium expiring have been giving a lot of money. This is according to Sarah Micklebust, bargaining for the Common and Good Research Director at Georgetown University's Initiative for Labor and the Working Poor. Quote, "I've been looking at real estate, housing, and landlords for about 15 years, and this feels like an extension of what I've seen at the state and local levels. You certainly see a pattern of landlords having closer relationships as a result of money and influence, and that could affect the way lawmakers see these issues, the questions they ask, and the timelines on which they're willing to take action or not." She added, "It's not shocking because we have seen this pattern again and again. What is shocking is that millions of people are at risk of not just becoming homeless, but also getting a deadly disease, the Delta variant, of course." So let's get to that donor. The donor that gave $1 million is George Marcus, chairman of both the massive real estate brokerage Marcus and Millichap and the real estate investment trust Essex Property Trust. He donated $1 million on June 1st at the House Majority PAC, a super PAC that works to elect Democrats. The donation amounted to nearly 7% of the total funding the committee has raised so far this year. Marcus himself also donated $263,400 in June to a joint fundraising committee benefiting House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's campaign, her leadership PAC, and the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. During the 2020 election cycle, Marcus donated a combined $1 million to the DCCC and the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, which elects Democratic Senate candidates. He contributed millions more to the party-aligned super PACs that aid those committees, $3.5 million to Senate Majority PAC and $3 million to the House Majority PAC. Marcus, who has a net worth of $1.7 billion, has also been a huge Biden supporter, donating $4 million to super PACs that supported Biden, Priorities USA, Unite the Country, and American Bridge PAC. He also hosted a Biden fundraiser back in 2019 and donated $500,000 to the Biden Victory Fund, a joint fundraising committee benefiting the Biden campaign, the DNC, and state parties. Marcus and Millichap is also the largest, which was founded in 1971, is the largest commercial real estate brokerage in North America and sells apartment buildings. While Marcus is part of a group of billionaire landlords that have together seen their personal fortunes increase by nearly $25 billion since last March, Marcus and Millichap has been hit hard by the pandemic. Because, of course, the eviction moratorium. Marcus also chairs and founded Essex Property Trust and controls a 3% stake in the company, according to Forbes. As of last year, Essex Property Trust had an ownership interest in 60,272 apartment units in California and Washington state, according to company disclosures. Over the last two election cycles, Essex Property Trust donated $23.5 million to committees that opposed ballot initiatives that would have allowed rent control measures in California. In the latest quarterly report, Essex Property Trust wrote that, that primarily as a result of the pandemic, its cash delinquency rate was higher than pre-pandemic periods, but improved from 4.3% for 3 months, ended June 30th, 2020, to 2.6% for the first 3 months, ended June 30, 2021. The company said that it has executed payment plans and will continue to work with the residents to collect cash delinquencies. And in an earnings call last week, Essex Property Trust CEO Michael Shaw said that the company expects its delinquency rate will return to normal levels over time as more workers enter the workforce and eviction protections lapse on September 30th in both California and Washington. When asked about the expiring federal moratorium, Shaw said that we, quote, "we expect to work with our residents to the extent that we can." Interesting. So there's Marcus and his connections, and of course the donations, and he is by far the only Democratic donor that stands to gain from the eviction moratorium expiring during the 2020 election cycle. Executives from the Blackstone Group, the private equity giant, donated $2.3 million to Senate Majority PAC, $250,000 to House Majority PAC, and $350,000 to Unite the Country, the pro-Biden super PAC. Blackstone has also been snapping up a lot of homes with cash, by the way, in order to turn them into rental properties. Not only that, but in June, Blackstone announced that it was buying Home Partners of America, a single-family home rental business that's related to that owns more than 17,000 homes. Blackstone also became a minority investor last year in Tricon Residential, which owns more than 30,000 single-family and multifamily rental homes in the United States and Canada. Lobbyists for real estate interests have also been flooding Democrats with money. The lobbying firm Brownstone Hyatt Farber Schreck has bundled $227,550 worth of donations to the DSCC. Brownstein's lobbying clients include Apollo Global Management and Ares Management, two private equity firms with substantial real estate interests. There's more. Aiken Gump Strauss Hauer Feld and its lobbyists bundled $336,500 for the DSCC this year. That firm lobbies for Koch Industries. We know, of course, that's headed by Charles Koch, that has been investing in residential real estate, specifically single-family rental homes during the pandemic. Again, they're buying up all these homes, they're driving up home prices, and turning everyone into essentially renters. Another Aiken Gump client, the National Association of Realtors, lobbied to end the CDC's eviction ban. The firm also lobbies for KKR, a private equity giant with significant investments in luxury apartments. So there's more. There's Heather Podesta. She is also involved. She raised $177,000 for the DSCC, $114,000 for the DCCC, and is the founder and CEO of Invariant LLC, which lobbies for the National Association of Realtors, and NAREIT, the National Association of Real Estate Investment Trusts. And of course, finally, Steve Elmendorf, a partner at Subject Matter, raised $62,000 for the DCCC this year. His clients include Blackstone and the American Investment Council, a lobbying group for private equity. The National Realtors Association PAC has separately bundled $114,500 worth of donations for conservative Democrat Joe Manchin of West Virginia this year. So yeah, all of this is connected. Okay. And yet, for some reason, Nancy Pelosi really wants to blame Republicans for this. You know, for doing the unanimous vote, the unanimous consent vote, which, by the way, only takes one Republican to, take it down. And so one might wonder, why would you do that? Why would you do unanimous consent when you know Republicans are bad? Well, it's so you can cover your tracks and say, oh, look, I tried to vote, but Republicans. She knew this was going to fail. There's no way she's dumb enough to think that Republicans actually care about the unhoused. They don't. And so, at the end of the day, this one is not on the Republicans. I mean, yes, of course, Republicans are terrible. They did vote against this. They're always going to vote against this. They would love nothing more than poor people to die. But we know that. And if we know that, because it's obvious, then so do the Democrats. But at the end of the day, understand that corporate Democrats, see, this isn't a right or left issue. This is top versus bottom. All that money went to conservative Democrats, Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, John Tester, etc. What happened was money in politics. What happens was class solidarity with the big donors and corporations. That's what happened. This is not an accident. It's not an oversight. It's not a oopsie poopsie, I forgot. No, it's we got money from the donors and we let this entire thing expire. And now we're going to pretend that, we're going to pretend to care while not doing anything, but then set up attack ads against Republicans. You know that that's what they're going to do. The only people that are actually fighting are the people that are outside, people like Cori Bush. If you're in the DC area, please join that protest. The more people you have, the better. Right now, understand that if you're mad at progressive lawmakers, if you're mad at AOC, Cori Bush, etc., I get it, right? Understand, but they're not the problem. Understand that they don't have the legislative power to get a moratorium back in place. They don't. It's so much easier to block something from getting done than to actually get something done. That's how our system works. Our system is set up to where it is so much easier to stop something from getting passed than actually getting something passed, than actually doing something. That's why it only takes one person to stop it, or a couple of people to stop it. And so that's the thing. Progressives don't have the power. They don't have the numbers. But what we do have something. We have public outrage and we have shame. The only thing that we have right now is to get enough attention, to get enough people protesting outside the Capitol, to shame the Democrats into doing something. Because, and look, understand that if that's our only option right now as regular people to join that protest, then, that's our only option, and we should exercise it to make sure that we help the millions that are suffering right now. Shame them into doing the right thing. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.